One of the things that I've always done on my channel is review new electronic equipment, specifically business equipment such as printers and laptops and whatnot. Basically anything that I purchase. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the setup and the usage of the HP OfficeJet Pro 9015 all-in-one printer. So the first thing I should say is the reason why I had to purchase a 9015 was because we had an HP, what was it, an HP 8017. And, okay, let me just show you what that looked like. It was an HP 8017 printer. This is it right here. And I have actually had 3 of these printers in different houses. And one of them broke because the print head decided to stop working after an ink cartridge change. Now this printer right here, the 8017, used 4 ink cartridges, cyan, blue, yellow, and black. So it used the 3 colors basically to create all colors, and then it used the black one to create black text, where the black cartridge is the largest cartridge, and usually if you purchase it, you get it's called the XL, which means that it's extra large, it has more ink. The 952 XL cartridge is the one that was designed for this printer. So the printer head gave out, broke. I did what I could, it didn't work. And basically I took it back to Best Buy, and Best Buy gave me the store credit, and I was looking to see what other options they had for printers. And they had a couple of these new models in this 9000 series. And one of them was marked down from $229 to $179. So I figured, okay, you know what? Instead of me getting, a cheaper one, I'll just go ahead and get this one that seems like it should be able to do everything in its mid-range. So, I'm about to, actually show you the setup and everything and show you how to set it up for whatever computer you might have. But the one thing I want to point out is that I've had HP printers pretty much all my life since I've had computers. I've always preferred HP printers to Canon printers. The one thing that you basically have to understand is that when you buy a printer now, it's really cheaper to do printing at your job or your school. But if you buy a printer now, they'll discount the printer to almost nothing. Like, for instance, this printer's $200. If they really want, they'll knock $100 off this printer. They'll sell you this printer for $100. They'll sell you this printer for $129, $100, $99. They'll go under $100. It's not the printer that you're buying. It's the ink that you're buying. Each cartridge of this ink, and I was at Walmart and I purchased ink from Walmart. Each cartridge, the black cartridge by itself, is about $34 to $35 when you factor in taxes, depending upon where you live. And each color cartridge is about $22. So you're talking about one black, which is $33 or so. And then you're talking about individual color cartridges that are $22 a piece. 22 times 3, that equals 66. So before taxes, you're already talking like $70 or more for the color ink. And then you're talking another $30 for the black cartridge. So guess where you are? You're at $100 per ink change. $100 per ink change. As far as the calculation about how much it actually costs to run this printer, to print a black page of text, it's going to cost you about 3 cents per page. To print a color page, it's going to cost you about 9 cents per page. They have these new services where it actually basically helps you break down how much it's going to cost you for every single, every single print job that you do. And that's basically what it is. 3 cents black, 9 cents color. So when you figure that the black cartridge is $33 to $35 unless you catch it on sale, and you figure each color cartridge is about $22 unless you catch them on sale, you still, no matter what, you're still talking, it's going to cost you $100 every time you need to refill this printer ink. So basically, it behooves you to do as much printing at your school if you're a student, because, this is back to school time. It also behooves you to do as much printing at your business as you can. So as for this printer, it's your typical printer, copy, scanner, fax. The funny thing is, nowadays, unlike the older models, now all you get is a touch screen. Everything's just a touch screen. There's no more buttons. Fortunately, all these printers have Wi-Fi, so that's not really an option you have to worry about. It's always pretty much going to be there. In fact, they'd almost rather put in Wi-Fi than they would to put in Ethernet, because for them, I think it's actually cheaper to just put a Wi-Fi chipset in. So basically, they're making these printers as cheaply as possible. So there's no buttons. There's only this small 2.5 or whatever inch screen. So that means that, if you have like big fingers, it's going to be harder to touch certain images on the screen, like letters, when you want to dial something. Now, they still do sell bigger, more robust printer, fax, copy scanners that actually have hard physical buttons. But ultimately, these things are being made as cheaply as possible. Now, this one, to me, looks a lot like an oversized Xbox One X, because it's white and it has these flares, these gray areas right here. Except for this top, it kind of looks like an overgrown Xbox One X to me. This style, I don't have a problem with. The only thing I'm interested in is the functionality. Now, they're claiming that this thing can do about 22 pages per minute, so I'm going to try to demonstrate that. I'll try to demonstrate a couple of black sheet prints, and I'll try to demonstrate a couple of color sheet prints. A lot of people come on, when I do printer reviews, a lot of people come on my reviews and they're always asking me questions about where they have to go for drivers. If you come to HEWLETTPACKARD.com, you can get drivers from HEWLETTPACKARD.com. If you need to see the manual that you didn't see when you were setting it up, you just come here and you can see the manual. For the most part, they've made setup pretty easy. Like if you're using an iPhone or an Android phone, you can pretty much print directly from your phone. Some people have asked me things about the fax machine. The fax machine obviously has to be plugged up properly in order for you to be able to send faxes. Faxes being different than digital, because you got to remember, a fax is basically analog. What they give you right here is they say you get the RJ11 modem port, and that's for your fax. And then you have Ethernet. Ethernet obviously plugs to your computer. And then you have one USB 2.0. So they're still using USB 2.0. They don't bother using 3.0 because for the most part, a print doesn't have a very large amount of data. A print is a small amount of data for the most part. Couple of megabytes. It's not a very big file. It says one host USB, so that means that allows you to print from JPEG, TIFF, or whatever. So basically what that is you can plug in a USB flash drive or whatever, and you can print directly off of that. And then you have a resolution of 1200 by 1200. These resolutions are pretty much higher than the human eye, so for the most part, the text is crisp and sharp. Then they're saying resolution color is 4800 by 1200, which is even better than black. So, the pictures, the resolution is high enough where with the human eye, you wouldn't be able to see imperfections. It's basically printing exactly what you're giving it to print. So this thing is 20 pounds, 19.69 pounds right here. It's a pretty bulky unit, but this is what you expect because obviously you have to be able to scan and whatnot. And that's basically that. So it's, it's a new model. Usually I end up somehow, one way or another, I end up getting a printer every 2 years. I've tried to take care of them, but the thing about it is it's like if you use them regularly, sooner or later they're going to break down. But if you don't use them regularly, sooner or later they're going to break down anyway. And one way or another, you're going to end up getting one of these things every 2 years. So I try to time myself so that every tax season, every other tax season, I'm ready to get a new one or a better one or something faster or something like that. But, when you have a lot of documents you have to print or when you're doing home business or whatever, that's just the name of the game. So as you can see, this is the OfficeJet Pro 9015. This is the 962 black cartridge. This is not the XL cartridge, but this is the black 962. So for the last printer I had to use these ink cartridges right here. This was the 952 XL. And where's the last one? And then there was the 952 magenta. So these are basically useless now. So I have to exchange these for the 962s, you know. So basically that's how it is. You have 3 cartridges for color and you have 1 for black. So let's open this bad boy up. Okay, so let's do a very quick unboxing. Okay, so these are the instructions that they give you. So this tells you all the tape that you have to remove in order to make sure the thing actually works when you take it out. Let's take this out. It comes with a box of, I believe this is starter ink. Some starter cartridges. That's really nice. Thank you. These things come out to fucking $100. So we got our starter cyan, magenta, and yellow. And then we have a starter black, 962. So that's great. So that means I don't have to open the other one. Yay. So this is the main unit. So this is the top load feeder. And this is the power. I have the power cord. The modem in and out is right there. So as you can tell, you plug one to your phone, you plug one to the house line. And then as you can see, you have the Ethernet port, which is right now plugged up with that yellow plug. And then you see there's the USB port right there. So basically, that's it. They've made these things as simple as possible. The entire unit came out of the box in basically like this little plastic bag and just a little plastic bag, and that's it. So this is the display. Tilts up, tilts down. They keep that as simple as possible. Power buttons right there, as you can see. Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, this isn't a light. Typically, most of these things have a light, so it lets you know if the Wi-Fi is active. But my guess is they just tried to keep this thing as cheap as possible. So naturally, you have to get rid of the blue tape. That gets it ready so that you can open up the ink system. So then you have this flatbed scanner with this cover. That's the flatbed scanner and the loading point right there. And this is where you put the ink once the system is on. And then this is your tray. Now your document tray holds about 35 pages at a time. You're supposed to load about 30 pages at a time just to ensure that there's no jams. And naturally you can pull it out for envelopes and for mail and whatnot. So besides the 9015, one of the other options that you'd probably see on the shelf, let's say you go to Best Buy, is the 8025. The 8025 looks almost exactly like the 9015, except the 9015 is physically larger. Now, the 8025 is $119, let's say right now. The 9015 is being sold there for $179.99. Now, to tell you the God's honest truth, after actually setting up and using this printer, this is one of the first HP printers that I kind of find it hard for myself to recommend to you. Now, typically I always give these things glowing reviews, and usually I'm always either satisfied or I'm impressed with them. But this one in particular was built so cheaply until I really, really, really feel that its future is in jeopardy. Like, for instance, the first thing I'm thinking is I better hold on to the receipt, and I hope this thing lasts the year, because I have to say, and I've had HP printers for a very long time, and because these things are made in China, obviously they're getting cheaper and cheaper, partially because the materials being used are cheaper and cheaper, but also in order to reduce weight, in order to make these things easier to ship internationally, in order to make it cost less, in order to maximize profit. This is easily one of the cheapest HP printers I've ever had to use. The front loading door, the cartridge tray, cheap plastic, thin, damn near as maybe 6 sheets of paper stacked on top of each other. That's how thin this plastic is. The whole plastic just bends, and it buckles just to the touch. It's just so soft. It doesn't feel like a quality product. That's the bottom line. So as you can see, like I did say something about, oh yeah, there's no Wi-Fi light. It turns out the Wi-Fi light is underneath the plastic, but that lets you know that because these lights are under the plastic, that tells you how thin the plastic actually is. It's thin enough for an LED light to shine through it. So that right there lets you know how thin it is. When I was using this thing, the first paper that I sent through jammed almost immediately. The paper reservoir tray has this cheap plastic feel to it that feels cheap, like if I went to the dollar store and I bought plastic dishes. I mean, it's the plastic in use here is just so ridiculously cheap. On loading, the paper jammed. So I had to stop what I was doing. I had to take the printer apart, which I'm going to show you in a second. And I had to unjam the printer just a few seconds in, which is not really a good sign. Furthermore, one thing I also noticed, I got to the screen where the screen said, you have to continue setup at hpsomething.com, 123.com. I wasn't able to simply do the setup on the screen, and there was no button given to me to say that, okay, if you don't have a cell phone or you don't have a computer, that you could just do the setup on the display on the printer, which was so weird because I've never had that issue before. Every other HP printer or printer that I've used in general has made it so that you do the entire setup process right on the screen. After the paper jammed, I had to clear the paper jam, and then I had to use my phone in order to finish the setup process because the computer itself said I couldn't move beyond clearing this paper jam. So if you look right here, the paper crumpled up, as you can see, and I had to put in this little retaining tray, which was also made of extraordinarily cheap plastic. I used to have a Lexmark at my office, and that Lexmark was it was like $1,000 laser printer. And having to reach in there and pull that cartridge out, push that cartridge back in there, the components were plastic, but they were high enough in quality where you felt like you weren't going to break anything. This printer tray, the paper retention gears and such, every single part of this printer looks and feels cheap upon close inspection. And I was shocked by how cheap this printer quality is. And I can't imagine this thing is going to last that long. I really can't. I'm fairly certain that although they promise it prints faster, up to 22 or something pages per minute, I'm fairly certain that this printer is not going to last a very, very long time. It actually hurts me to say this, but it's extraordinarily difficult for me to want to recommend this printer right here to anybody. Now, I can't necessarily say that this is a bad printer until I have a very, very long time to test it. If they test these things and they actually use these things in labs and whatnot, and they do, thorough, rigorous testing, most likely, if they treat them with kids' gloves, these things will last a good long time. And they know what the failure rate of these things is. But this has to be the first time that I've actually used one of these things where I felt that this thing feels so cheap that I almost don't want it. So as you can see, just like your typical HP printer, just like your typical printer in general, the first thing you have to do to align it is you have to activate the alignment process, which is going to print a single sheet of paper, which is color and black and white. And when you take that paper, you put it onto the glass scanner, you simply push start, and it will automatically self-align itself. Now, the important thing to remember at this procedure is, just in case you don't know how to do this, or just in case you're not very computer savvy, one of the positives is that Hewlett Packard includes videos right here on the screen, on the LCD screen, that you can watch. And those videos will pretty much give you detailed information through visuals about how to do it. We haven't reached the point where there's speakers and the video has sound and whatnot, and it can actually walk you through the process with audio clues. But the videos, for the most part, if you pay close attention, the videos can get you through it. So, The next thing I did, the alignment process was pretty quick and straightforward and easy. So as long as you don't have any paper jams, the alignment goes very, very easily, very quick. Second thing I wanted to do was set up the fax machine. There's a lot of different features in here, which reminds me almost directly of the user interface of the 8710. The only difference was that one actually had buttons. This one does not. It only has the touch screen, which means that you have to go through the touchscreen for every single thing with the exception of turning the power on and off. Now, right here, what you can see is the fax machine. You set up your fax number. You set up in the wizard. It pretty much walks you right through it. And when you touch one of these buttons, it asks you which sub button do you want. Like if you push 5, it'll go JKL. Which one do you want to push, the letter or the number? And then right after that, once you've set up your number, you can give it a name, the fax machine a name on your network. It's basically, if you've ever used one of these HP printers, it's very, very similar to any of the other ones you've ever used that used a touchscreen interface. So I'll give it like this. The setup is actually quite easy. When I pulled it out of the box, it came in a plastic bag. All you had to do was lift it right out of the box and just plug it in, take the tape off. That was it. You were ready to go. This printer can print passport photos, or at least it can print photos to the specifications of the passport sizing. And I also, in a second, will show you how the scanner works so that this way you can see that, it's just like all the other ones. You just lay something flat on the scan bed and it scans. And as you can see, you get reports. The reports can tell you about how much ink you're using. The reports can tell you other basic things about the printer, such as, IP networking and what this, that, and other. Then there are some apps that you can download. I usually don't bother with any of that, but they exist. And then one of those apps, one of those services is the printer ink replenishment, where if you pay HP a certain amount of money, they can get you ink when they know you're going to need it. It's ink on demand, basically. So it asks, would you like to update certain aspects of the printer? Because this thing's on the internet, it can be easily updated. It can find new drivers. It can find new software if it has to, new firmware. Update itself right on the internet. It connects through the Wi-Fi with almost no trouble. In fact, when I was using the printer, I didn't have any trouble whatsoever printing to it from my cell phone. And it was ready to go. So if you're hooking it up in your house through Ethernet, that'll probably be the most solid connection that you can use. If you're setting it up through Wi-Fi, that's not as solid as Ethernet, but it works just as well. So for the most part, I have to say the looks of this printer are pretty good. As far as print speed, this thing promises up to 22 pages per minute. Now, I printed, as you can see, 2 color photos. One of a car, another of 3 cars. And it takes a little time for it to get started. It feels like it takes a while for it to get started. It almost feels like every print that's a color photo is going to take like a minute. Now, they say up to 22 pages per minute, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get 22 pages per minute. It just means that it's possible. But when they're saying 22 pages per minute, what they're really saying is if you're printing black and white text on white paper with no background, the fastest it will be able to go is about 22 pages per minute. It's never going to be able to do that with color photos because color photos require too much detail and it has to pass the printer heads by a little bit slower. So as you can see, this is the photo that I made. It was on regular paper, not glossy, and it's a pretty accurate representation to what was on my phone, the picture I printed of the Corvette. Colors were a little bit washed out. And when I say a little washed out, they were a little lighter than the deeper, darker colors on my actual phone. And as you can see here, this was the other photo I printed out. It chopped off the top of the Viper. It also chopped off the bottom of the Corvette C8. But it, as you can see, gave a good representation as to what was on my phone, albeit with slightly lighter contrast than what was on my phone. My phone's contrast was definitely darker. Now, would this have changed if I had increased the quality of the print and put in glossy paper? Oh, definitely. So, HP, I do trust them to give you photo quality printers. That seems to be something they do very well. I like them more than Canon because if you're using an HP computer, their color matching software is actually quite good. The last thing I wanted to do was I demonstrated what it looks like if you print out a color letter rather than a color photo of a car. So that, as you can see, comes out a lot quicker. This was my student loan payoff letter, something I'm so proud of. I keep it as a favorite on my phone. And Navient ain't getting another damn dime from me, and neither is the federal government. You ain't getting no more interest off me. You better go talk to these millennials out there because I'm not having it. So anyway, the last thing I was going to do was show you the scanner copier mode. So on top, Flatbed Scanner. It used to be in the old days where you had to buy a scanner separately and you had to buy a printer separately. Now everybody who buys one of these new printers pretty much gets a scanner and a copier in one. And the scan copy is probably going to be the thing that you use the most. Now, it's funny because you really think that you'd use the printer the most. But really, when you have to scan bills and you've got to scan receipts, like when it comes time for tax time, it's really going to be the scanner that you actually use the most. This thing has a document feeder for its scanner, so it can scan documents one by one, and it can print them and make copies of those documents. One thing I did like was right here, you have a touch to preview. When you touch it, it shows you a preview of what is on the scan bed. And that preview is a pretty much one-to-one representation, albeit scaled down. So it scans. We'll see in a second how quickly it scans and how quickly it's able to copy that photo. And as you can see, it scans and it copies relatively quickly. The colors are almost one-to-one. The contrast, again, a little washed out because as you can see on the right, you see the colors are a lot darker and deeper. And on the left, the photo that was printed is just a little bit less dark and sharp. Other than that, this printer works pretty well, but my problem was it just feels cheap, and I don't feel completely comfortable recommending this if you can get another printer made by HP that is more expensive and has all of the physical buttons that you're probably going to need if you're running a home office. There are other options.